Good evening, everybody. We are ready to roll tonight, and tonight's webinar is 3 legal loopholes to burn off 3 pounds of fat in 8 days or less. Now, you can chat, or you can, in the left-hand chat column, feel free to type in any questions you want, and at the end of the webinar, I'm going to give a section where I actually go over the questions, and I'll answer your questions. So if I don't answer them during the webinar, that's okay. I'll get to them at the end. But these are things that the 3 legal loopholes, I want to talk about that for a minute. These are things that before we even get to those, I think this is more important, and that is prioritizing eating over exercise. And here's what I mean by that. People commonly overload exercise and undercut their calories whenever they physically. If you ask Dr. Oz, if you ask any dietitian, any personal trainer, they're all going to tell you the same thing. Exercise more and eat less. They're all going to say that. They're all going to say that. They're all going to say that. And so what we say is, I say the exact opposite of that. What I say is, well, first off, let me back up a minute. When you do that and you over-exercise and you under-eat, it leads to severe bouts of hunger down the road. And when I say down the road, I don't mean 2 days later or even a week later. What I mean is later that day. It could be a few hours later. It could be 2 hours later. It could be 3 meals later. But that's what happens. And that's what the number one biggest problem that goes on, whether you're a housewife that just wants to lose 6 pounds of body weight, or you're a competitor getting ready for the Olympia in 2 more days. So the first thing people do when they exercise, when they just overload the exercise, is their eating takes a back seat. They don't pack, they don't measure, and they kill it in the gym. Now, if they do pack and they do measure, well, there's still other issues going on, which we're going to get to in just a second. We will get to in just a second in this webinar here. Now, just because you pack your food, that doesn't mean you eat correctly. That doesn't mean you're eating the right food. But here's what it does mean, and I'm going to get to that in the next slideshow up here. And 99%, how do I focus on eating over exercise? That's what people say. How do I focus on eating over exercise? Number one, you got to follow 3 legal loopholes. And I call these legal loopholes because anybody can do them. By legal and by loophole, I mean anybody can do them. Anybody has access to them. And they're loopholes in that they make things easier. They cover your bases. If you do these 3 things, are you going to be doing everything perfect? Well, no, probably not. Are you going to be, does that mean your eating will be perfect, or that your eating will even be the best plan for you? Well, probably not. But you know what? It'll cover your bases, and you'll be better off than before. If you can implement these, you'll be better off, significantly better off. So, number 1, eat in reverse. And I'm going to talk about all these on their own slide. Number 2, don't wait till you're hungry to eat. And number 3, food is the solution, not the problem. Okay? Now, never eat in reverse. And I put Christine up here, that's her photos, and I'll talk about her more in a minute. But never eat in reverse. Never write down what you eat after you eat it. I call that eating in reverse, because by then it's too late. You've already eaten it. And the first thing someone says is, well, why can't I keep a food journal and jot down what I eat? That's how I track what I eat. And then I say what I just said, because once you've eaten it, it's too late. Meals should be written out in advance. And anybody can do this. You can have a pre-designed, now if you make it yourself, well, that might not be the best, but the point is, however your plan of attack is, you want to have it pre-designed in advance. And I use Christine's photos here. This is a good example. And she lost 1.5 inches off her waist in the first week. I'm sorry, in the first month. And I think 4 pounds of scale weight. And you can see right here, and I know she's raising her arms, but you can still see here that there's not as much of a pooch, that there's a little bit more definition in the upper oblique area, and it's just a narrower waistline. So even if you're a thin person or you're an endomorph with a higher genetic set point for body fat, this will still help. But I wanted to use her because she was the typical person that, and I can remember she would tell me how she would just be almost crippled after a day in the gym, like training legs. I mean, just sets, supersets, reps, going crazy, and would be super sore. And with what we did, and for those of you that have been on board with me, is that not only is your eating customized, but I put you on a very basic, very, very basic but super effective exercise program. You're in the gym less than 3 hours a week, 2 brief, 10-minute metabolic days a week, and she slashed her gym cardio workout time from like 8 hours a week down to like I said, less than 3, and ate more food, and this still happened to her. And one of the biggest things for her is that she had a nutrition program, or her assigned meals were she already knew what she was eating before each meal. In fact, she knew what she was going to eat before the week even started. She had her full month pre-programmed, as opposed to just fumbling and bumbling for each meal. So meals should be written out in advance. Never go into a meal without a game plan. The meal plan is what's going to ensure you eat what you're supposed to eat. I mean, if you don't have that guideline, if that map, it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult. You are not taking advantage of something that anybody has access to. Eat on the clock. This is huge. Okay? There are 2 times you should eat. Now, whichever happens first is which of the 2 you'll go with, and I'll explain in just a second here. Number 1, 2 to 4 hours after your last meal. Okay? So within 2 to 4 hours after your last meal is when you should eat. Or when you get hungry. Now you're like, wait a minute, you just said don't wait till you get hungry to eat. No, you shouldn't wait until you're hungry to eat your next meal. But if you happen to get hungry 2.5 hours after your last meal, then go ahead and eat it. Once that 2-hour barrier is broken, you can eat if you really are hungry. Now, you might not be hungry after 2 hours. You might need to wait an extra 2 hours. Now, we don't want you to wait after 4 hours because some people have a metabolism like a snail. It's just so slow. And if you wait after 4 hours, what's going to happen is that I can use me as an example, and I have a very, very well-functioning metabolism, is that after like I can think of times where I've waited like 3 hours, and I'm not that hungry, so I'll wait, and then within a matter of 15 minutes, I'll just get super hungry. It's the weirdest thing. My point I'm making here is that the same thing can happen to you. Is that it doesn't take long at all for hunger to sneak up on you once it's been a long time. Okay? Now, I know the first thing you're going to say is, what if I get hungry before the first 2 hours? If you're hungry an hour after your meal, or an hour and a half after your meal, add 1 apple, eat an apple, and drink 1 glass of ice water. Most people get hungry when it's really thirst, tons of water. We want you well hydrated, we want your system flushed out, and we want you eating a ton of food. If you're always hungry after the same meal, then you need to add food to the first and previous meal. Let me give you an example here. In fact, let me back up a little bit. I'm getting ahead of myself. So if you're really hungry an hour, and I've had people say that. They said, people who were clients of mine who followed my program have said, hey, I was hungry 30 minutes after meal number 2 or meal number 1. I've had people say that. Well, that clearly tells me if you're always hungry after the same meal, like I'm always, like all week long, I've been hungry after meal number 2. Let's just use this as an example. What I'm going to do, let's pick a different meal. Let's say meal number 4. Let's say this person's eating 6 meals a day, and they said, yeah, Jeff, I'm hungry every day after meal number 4, between meal 4 and meal 5. Well, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the first meal of the day and add 1 whole organic brown egg. Like, why the first meal? Because you always want to front load your calories. If you want to, we don't want to go back to where the hunger usually comes from an ongoing deficit. So we want to go back to the start, front load some calories, and just an egg. We're not adding 4 eggs or a cup of oats. We're just adding to the additional meal one brown egg, and then we're going to go back to the previous meal, which if they're getting hungry after meal number 4 would be meal number 4. So meal 1 gets an egg. Meal 4 is going to get something like a 1/4 cup black beans, in addition to what they're already eating. In addition to what they're already eating, you're like, well, that's not much. You don't need much. If you proper food placement, proper food. So many people out there don't know how to do proper food placement. They don't know how to design nutritional programs. You know, so many people. There's so many quasi gurus and quasi experts out there that think you have to separate protein ion exchange molecules in a test tube in a lab, or put on a lab coat and look under a microscope to understand nutrition. That's insane. That don't even have basic application on how to place food within a daily eating pattern. And that's what I'm good at. And if you do it correctly and you know how to front load and proper placement of fats, proteins, and carbs relative to the individual and their activity level throughout the day, you can maximize their nutrition. Okay? So that's how we do it. And that's something that I would do, and take notes on this. This is something you should be able to take home and get your bases covered with. But eat on the clock. Do you see here, this is a, what's a good word to use? This is a, all my bases are covered. If this doesn't work, go here. If that doesn't work, go back here. So all my bases are covered on this scenario. Does this make sense? And guys, I apologize for all my heavy breathing and if it sounds like I have congestion, it's been horrible allergies here recently. So pardon me for that. Let's move on. Eat on the clock. And I put eat on the clock 2 because there's more to this. Now, this is Jennifer, and she signed up a few years ago. She lost 6 inches off her waist in the first month. And this is someone that flooded her body with smart nutrition, followed a basic program, got out of the gym, and you see the results. What if I'm not, now I get this a lot, what if I'm not hungry when it's time to eat? In other words, what if I wait 4 hours and I'm just not hungry? Here's what I say. Well, in that case, you want to wait the full 3.5 to 4 hours, and if you're still not hungry, always finish a meal. Fight it down. Get it down. And you never ever want to undercut a meal, and here's why. Because those nutrition-rich calories, and when I say those nutrition-rich calories, the calories that are in the leftover meal you couldn't finish, you're going to need those. Here's why. They're going to force your sluggish, if you force-feed healthy food, and you're not getting a ton of food, the meals are small. If you force your sluggish metabolism into a higher gear, what does that mean? Well, here's what that means. When you eat a moderate to high amount of quality, nutrient-rich, I don't like the word clean, but we'll say whole, natural, nutritious foods, and a lot of women I've worked with have a damaged digestive system, in the sense that they've eaten so many Quest bars, drunk so many protein shakes, eaten twigs and berries, their metabolisms, their digestive system, which governs the metabolism, it's lazy. It's lazy in the sense that it's not used to having to work hard. And when you make a muscle or an organ work hard, up to a certain point, what happens? It gets stronger. It gets stronger. Your heart's a muscle. How do you think your heart gets stronger? When you go for a jog. When your cardiovascular system has to work harder. Your muscles get stronger when you work out, exercise. Same thing with your metabolism speeds up when you use your digestive system effectively. And people have no idea, they undersell the profound metabolic capabilities of digestion. So by finishing your meal, the 3 or 4 extra bites of healthy whole food, that's going to force your digestive system to push that metabolism to speed up. And also, those extra calories from the healthy food are going to sustain your blood sugar levels until your next meal. I've had women tell me on programs that I designed for them, oh, I was so stuffed I couldn't finish meal number 2, but I was starving 3 hours later. And I said, well, if you'd finished meal number 2, you wouldn't have been starving. They're like, well, I couldn't. Well, if you were starving 3 hours later, you probably could have. You could have chewed up one more half a tomato and another bite of ground beef. You could have finished it. Do you see my point, guys? Do you follow what I'm saying? Finish your meals. Look, I mean, people, it's hard for some. I mean, eating a ton of food and drinking a ton of water is hard work for some people. They're so used to just protein bars and protein shakes and eating processed garbage all day that Frosted Flakes, the cereal, isn't going to require as much effort out of your digestive system, your esophagus technically is a stomach, large intestine, small intestine, as would old-fashioned rolled oats. That's a good example, or quinoa. Okay. Now, here's the thing, guys. Food is the solution. It's not the problem. Well, carbs are why I'm fat, or this banana cream pie is why I'm fat, or these cupcakes are why I'm fat, or I'm fat, and they blame being fat or obese or weight gain on food, when in reality, food's a solution. Now, here's what they say. And they don't, and the people, and when I say the people, I'm talking about 99.9% of people. And I'm probably talking about everybody that's listening to this webinar, whether you want to admit it or not. And it used to be me about 15, not eventually though. But my point is this. If they don't look to food, what do 99% of people look to? They look to cardio, they look to weight training, they look to fat loss pills, they look to horrible Quest bars. They should be, I mean, they don't help at all. Protein shakes, those aren't the solution to speeding up your metabolism and burning body fat. Too many people try to make food the problem when it's the solution. Food isn't the problem, not knowing how to use food is. Food can be your greatest ally or your greatest foe. It all depends on how you use it. Now, when does food become the problem? And this is Sully. She was on board with me for about 8 months, made phenomenal progress, and she had a lot of ups and downs. She had some bad meals. She'd have a few binges, but she always ate her next meal like it was the most important meal of her life. And that's why she, even though she had some setbacks, still kept getting leaner and still kept making progress. But for her and for everybody, it's whether you've been with me for 6 weeks, 6 months, or 16 years, you've always got to eat your next meal like it's the most important meal of your life. Anyway, when you eat food not on your assigned meal program, that's when food becomes the problem. When you eat food that's not assigned for your next meal. And I can hear it now. But I eat healthy and still can't lose weight. I said almost every client I've ever had sign up say, well, I already eat healthy. Well, if that's the scenario you think you're in, let's take a better look at that. You can eat healthy and still not lose body fat. And I'm going to explain how. Number one, how is that possible? I'm going to tell you. Number one, you're eating the wrong foods now. And I use these foods as an example. Apple, protein, or apple, natural peanut butter, chicken, and protein powder. Now let me say one thing. All these, now protein powder is technically a supplement, but I'll tell you why I'm using that as the example here. But first let me say all of these can be could be components of a complete nutritious eating program. They could be. All these could be worked in to a balanced nutritional fat loss program. We all agree that. Okay. Well, why'd you pick these? I'm going to tell you why. Three years ago, I knew a girl, and she was a school teacher, so she'd be up in the morning, cardio before school, after school, she's at the gym at 4, back at the gym at 4, and she was on like a crash diet. And all she was eating was apple, natural peanut butter, chicken breasts. I think I left out broccoli. She was eating broccoli, and then protein powder. And that's all she ate. Now, once again, I know protein powder is not a food; it's a supplement, and but follow me on the greater picture here. She was eating foods that could all be that are all approved and could all be part of a healthy program. But when that's all you eat, in other words, when you limit your food choices, and none of these are really awesome foods, by the way. Okay, it's not like she was eating wild salmon or kale or grass-fed beef or organic brown eggs. It's not like she had any really awesome foods, but these foods would be approved on a program. But my point is that, so, and she ended up losing not a bunch of weight, but making decent progress, but she just overloaded her cardio and, ate a reduced calorie diet with, quasi-healthy foods and ended up crashing. You can't sustain that. And when I say crash, what I mean is binge and gain 6 pounds back, and then it's wash, rinse, repeat. And it's just like most people, don't have a clue how to eat right. And I'm not going to go off on that, but the other reason is when you undereat, and she was undereating. And guys, even if you eat maintenance level or a little bit below maintenance, but you over cardio, you're going to drive your caloric deficit down lower, if that makes sense. So when you're over cardioing and undereating, you're double amplifying your energy deficit. Okay? And that leads to severe jailbreak binges. That's exactly what happens. So we've hit it, guys. We got in, we got out. Questions. Now, don't panic on me. I'm going to minimize the screen here. Don't panic. Don't panic. I'm still here. I'm going to read your questions, and we'll roll with it. So I'm going to take off screen sharing, so don't panic. I'll still be here. But if you have any questions, now's the time to ask. So, and we can take people on the call. You can hop on if you want. You can jump on if you want, and we'll roll with that. Do me a favor if you